12 hours. Just 12 hours. To close a case with so many disturbing details, on November 5th, 2009, a father discovered the body of his 13-year-old son hanging from a wooden beam in an abandoned family home. The boy was bound hand and foot with professional knots, dressed in a woman's red dress with a heavy iron weight dangling between his legs. On his forehead, a tiny pinhole. But less than half a day later, police closed the case. The conclusion? Accident. A 13-year-old boy who tied himself up, who hanged himself, wearing a red dress in a house where nobody knew he was there. Accident. Do you believe that? This is the case that even today, more than 15 years later, divides China. Half believe the police conclusion, half believe in a cover-up, and some believe in something else entirely. Something darker, something supernatural. A remote rural village, an abandoned house with 3 doors, and a scene so horrifying it forces you to ask, how could a child do this to himself? I need to be honest with you. This case is one of those that kept me awake for many nights. Not because it's violent, but because it's so strange. So many details that cannot be explained. But before we go further, I need to be clear about something. What I'm about to tell you is compiled from publicly available sources, media reports, and documents available online. The case is technically still under investigation, and details may change. Nothing here confirms any specific allegations. This is simply examining what we know and what doesn't add up. So let's begin. November 2009. A remote village in Chongqing, China. A father arrives at his old family home. He hasn't heard from his son in over a week. The front door is locked, the side door too. But the back door, a door the family never uses, always blocked by heavy wooden boards and a steel bar, is wide open. The barricade has been moved aside, placed neatly against the wall. This detail, later on, would become one of the biggest questions in this case. He steps inside, and what he sees will haunt him for the rest of his life. Will haunt millions of Chinese people, and perhaps, after you hear this story, will haunt you too. To understand how a 13-year-old boy ended up in such a nightmare, we need to go back to learn about who he was. His name was Kuang Zhijun. Zhijun was born and raised in Changxing Village, Banan District, Chongqing. It was a place steeped in tradition, the kind of rural community where elderly villagers still held folk beliefs, where festivals brought neighbors together, and where everyone knew everyone. For Zhijun, it was home. It was where he belonged. But like many children in rural China, Zhijun was what they call a left-behind child. That's the name they give to kids like him. His parents, Kuang Zhijun and Gu Donghui, worked as farmers in Qiangbei district on the northern side of Chongqing. The work was too far for a daily commute, so they had to live apart from their only son. Their one child, Zhijun stayed at a boarding school where he was a 7th grader in class 2. His classmates described him as a quiet and introverted boy. He did what his teachers told him, studied hard, and kept to himself. He didn't have many close friends, but the ones he had said he was kind, gentle, shy, the type who spoke softly, smiled often, looked down when he greeted people. He wasn't the type to start a conversation first, but he always responded kindly when spoken to. Those who knew Zhijun remembered him as one of the kindest boys they had ever met. But there was one thing Zhijun was passionate about, one thing that made his eyes light up. Ghost stories, supernatural tales, stories about spirits and strange things. If you ask Zhijun about any folktale or supernatural legend, chances are he already knew it. His favorite book was Liao Cai Zhi Yi, Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio, a famous collection by Pu Songling about supernatural tales, about corruption and injustice toward common people. This detail about his love for ghost stories would later make some people ask a terrifying question. Was Zhijun trying to turn himself into a ghost? The family still owned their old house near the school, the home where Zhijun had grown up, before his parents moved out of Banan district for work. Now, it sat mostly empty, dusty, and unoccupied, but it was still theirs. And every weekend, Zhijun would travel to Qiangbei to visit his parents. It was their routine, the only real time they could spend together as a family. 2 days, just 2 days each week. That's all a 13-year-old boy got with his parents. On the weekend of October 24th, 2009, Zhijun made his usual visit to his parents. It was a cold weekend, and the family spent their brief time together as they always did. Before leaving to return to school, Zhijun mentioned something to his mother. He said he wanted to stop by the old house, maybe to clean it up a bit, and his mother didn't think much of it. She gave him a few hundred yuan for food, books, and other necessities, and sent him on his way. This was the last time they saw him alive. A week passed. Zhijun's parents assumed he was back at school, living his normal life, studying, eating in the cafeteria, sleeping in the dormitory with his roommates. But there was a problem. Zhijun's phone had broken a few days earlier. His father couldn't even try to contact his son. Meanwhile, at the boarding school, teachers and classmates noticed Zhijun hadn't shown up. Hadn't shown up in class, hadn't shown up in the cafeteria, hadn't shown up in the dormitory. But it was flu season. Student absences were common. They assumed he was just sick, maybe recovering at home. No one called the family to check. More than 30 students were absent that week due to flu. One more missing student, nobody noticed. When the next weekend came, Zhijun's mother stood waiting by the door. Like every week, he always arrived on time, always carrying his worn-out backpack, always smiling when he saw his mother. Hours passed. He never showed. His father tried calling Zhijun's phone from a different number. It rang and rang, but no one answered. On November 5th, Kuang Zhijun called the school directly, and that's when he learned the truth. Zhijun hadn't been to school in over a week. He hadn't slept in his dormitory. No one had seen him since he'd left for the old house. Kuang Zhijun's heart sank. A cold feeling spread through his body. His only son, gone for over a week. He rushed to the old family home, hoping, praying that his son was there, that there was some simple explanation. But there was something stranger, something he didn't know. The night before, his wife had a dream. A strange dream, a frightening one. She saw a tall man dressed in black clothes and wearing a black hat, carrying a bag. The man entered the house in Shuangxing village through the back door. He looked at her and urged her to go back to the old house. Right now, when she woke up, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that her son needed her. Now, you might think this was just a dream, a coincidence, the mind of a worried mother. And maybe it was, but the timing, the night before they discovered the truth, that's what makes people stop and think. Kuang Zhijun's heart was pounding as he approached the old house. The house looked as abandoned as ever, grass growing tall around it, windows covered in dust, walls peeling from time and neglect. He went to the front door, locked tight from the outside. He tried the side door, also locked. It seemed like his son had never returned to the old house at all. So where had he gone? Where for over a week? Then he remembered. There was a back door. A door rarely used, usually blocked by a steel bar. With a fragile thread of hope, he walked to the back door. The steel bar was gone. The door could be opened. That meant his son had actually returned. He breathed a sigh of relief. He pushed the door. It creaked, opened. But the moment the door swung fully open, the moment light from outside flooded inside, the moment his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw. He saw what made him so horrified he nearly fainted. He saw what would haunt him for the rest of his life. Hanging from the wooden beam on the ceiling was the body of his 13-year-old son. For a moment, Kuang Zhijun couldn't move. His legs felt frozen. His mind went blank. Then his legs gave out. He nearly collapsed. But a father's instinct took over. He rushed forward. He brought his son's body down. He called the police. What I'm about to describe next is the scene that police found. I won't go into graphic detail, but you need to understand why this case is so haunting, why it's unlike any other case. Zhijun was suspended from the wooden beam by his wrists, not by his neck, like in typical suicide cases. By his wrists. Not his neck, his wrists. Both his hands and feet were bound tightly with rope, 12 loops on each hand, 12 loops on each foot. But these weren't sloppy knots. They were uniform, precise, almost perfect. The kind of knots that a 13-year-old child, How could he do this to himself? Between his legs hung an iron weight, very heavy, pulling his body down, making the ropes tighten even more. On his forehead, a small hole, as if a sharp needle had been pushed through the skin. Stop for a moment and think about that. A pinhole on his forehead. No one has explained this. But what made this scene truly bizarre, truly incomprehensible, was what the boy was wearing. A bright red floral dress, a woman's dress. Underneath the dress, a woman's black one-piece swimsuit. Stuffed inside the chest of the swimsuit were 2 pieces of black cloth shaped to mimic breasts. Zhijun's own clothes, completely gone, not found anywhere. When I first read about this case, I had to put my notes down. I sat there for 20 minutes just trying to process what I'd learned, because what happened next, I still can't believe it. Crime scene photos showed no signs of struggle, no footprints from anyone else, no disturbed items, but investigators did find some things. Candle wax drippings on the floor, traces of Zhijun's semen at the scene, 32 yuan still in his pocket, his cell phone still in his backpack. No theft, no signs of break-in, no explanation. So what happened? The house was cold, the air stagnant, the smell of dust and abandoned time. And then there was the back door, the door the family never used, always blocked by heavy wooden boards and a steel bar. Wide open, completely wide open. The barricade had been moved aside, placed neatly against the wall. Who opened it and why? Medical examiners determined that Zhijun had died on November 3rd or 4th due to asphyxiation. That meant he had been in that house alone, in the darkness, for days. No one knows what he was thinking in those final hours. No one knows if he was afraid, if he called for help, but the real question isn't how he died. The question is, why? Why would a 13-year-old boy be in such a situation? Why was the back door open? Why were the knots so professional? Why was there a pinhole on his forehead? Why was he wearing a red dress? Why? After a month of investigation, police gave their answer. An answer that almost no one believed. The official conclusion from Chongqing police, self-inflicted accident. According to them, Zhijun had accidentally killed himself while engaging in a sexual act that went too far. Sexual asphyxiation, autoerotic asphyxiation. Their evidence? The candle wax drippings, they argued, suggested masochistic behavior. The complex rope bindings were consistent with erotic bondage practices, and forensic examination had found traces of Zhijun's own semen at the scene. Their conclusion? Zhijun had accidentally killed himself while performing a sexual act that lost control. This conclusion sparked outrage. For the family, the idea that their quiet, obedient son had died in such a manner was unbearable. They had known Zhijun his whole life. He showed no signs of psychological disturbance, no hint of sexual deviancy. He was just a shy kid who liked ghost stories. But for the public, this explanation raised more questions than it answered. How could a 13-year-old boy, acting alone, tie his own hands and feet with such professional-looking knots, then hang himself from a beam? What about the pinhole on his forehead? That detail didn't fit the sexual asphyxiation theory at all. Why was the back door, a door the family never used, wide open with the barricade neatly moved aside? And why were the police so eager to close the case without addressing these inconsistencies? 12 hours. They closed the case in 12 hours. Taiwanese lawyer Yan Rui-Ching, who later analyzed the case publicly, said it plainly. It's impossible to properly close a case like this in just 12 hours. And he's right. Think about that. 12 hours to investigate a death with so many strange elements. Police said the boy tied himself, but the knots were too perfect, too uniform. Police said this was sexual behavior, but the pinhole on the forehead couldn't be explained. Police said no one else was involved, but the back door had been opened. By whom? No detailed autopsy report was released. No security camera footage, no explanation for the origin of the black swimsuit. Why was so much information missing? Zhijun's family demanded the investigation be reopened. They hired lawyers. They sought justice. Police refused. Refused to reopen, refused to explain, refused to acknowledge any mistakes. One weak theory suggested that the mother's ex-husband and eldest son had conspired to kill the boy in revenge, over a dispute. But police insisted the pair had an alibi. So if not murder, if not an accident in the way police described, then what's left? The Chinese internet had its own theory. And it had nothing to do with sexual games. It involved something far darker. The theory started on Baidu, China's equivalent of Reddit, and spread like wildfire. Users noticed something about Zhijun's reported age at death. Based on the estimated time of death and his birth date, netizens calculated that Zhijun had died at exactly 13 years and 13 days old. 13 years, 13 days, exactly. And in traditional Chinese folk culture, particularly traditions associated with Taoist practices, the number 13 is considered deeply yin. Yin. Yin is the dark, cold, feminine energy in Chinese cosmology associated with death, the moon, and the supernatural. To die at 13 years and 13 days was seen as the most yin state possible, what practitioners called Zhiyin, the ultimate yin. A condition that, according to believers, would make the victim's soul extremely valuable for dark rituals. Now, this 13 years and 13 days detail was never confirmed by official sources. It appears to have been calculated by netizens and may not be accurate. But accuracy didn't matter to those who believed. To them, the numbers were too perfect to be coincidence. And the numbers were just the beginning. Netizens began analyzing every detail of the crime scene through the lens of Taoist mysticism, specifically the theory of the 5 elements: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. They found all 5 present at the scene. The iron weight hanging from Zhijun's feet was said to represent metal. The beam from which he was hung was made from wood. The color of the swimsuit was black, which is a color associated with water in Chinese symbolism. The red dress represented fire. And the ground below, or some argue Zhijun's body itself, represented earth. In feng shui and Taoist ritual practice, the 5 elements must be balanced and aligned. To have all 5 present at a death scene, arranged so deliberately, suggested to believers that this was no accident. And this was no self-inflicted death. This was a ritual. The theory centered around one name, Maoshan. Maoshan is a real place, a mountain in Jiangsu province that has been a center of Taoist practice for over 2,000 years. The Maoshan school of Taoism, founded during the Western Han dynasty by 3 brothers named Mao Ying, Mao Gu, and Mao Zong, collectively known as the 3 Mao true monarchs, became famous for its talismans, exorcisms, and rituals dealing with spirits and the dead. In popular culture, especially Hong Kong horror films, Maoshan sorcery became synonymous with supernatural rituals involving ghosts, curses, and manipulation of the soul. According to the online theory, Zhijun had been the victim of a Maoshan curse designed to do one of 2 things: either shatter his soul so completely that he could never reincarnate, or harvest his soul for the sorcerer's own use. The theorists broke down each element. The red dress was a soul-locking garment, meant to trap the soul inside the body. The iron weight was a soul wing stone, meant to prevent the soul from escaping. The needle wound on his forehead was from a soul-splitting needle, inserted to fracture the soul. The hanging position, suspended off the ground, prevented the soul from returning to the earth and finding peace. And the female clothing, combined with the yin timing, maximized the dark energy, making the soul more potent for extraction. Believers argued that whoever did this had intimate knowledge of Zhijun, his date of birth, his schedule, his family's habits. They knew when he would be alone, they knew the house would be empty, and they had the expertise to perform an elaborate ritual without leaving obvious evidence of their presence. The motive? Some speculated revenge against the family. Others suggested that the sorcerer needed Zhijun's soul to extend their own life or to achieve some kind of spiritual breakthrough. A few even connected the case to a string of other child deaths across China, suggesting there was a serial killer on the loose. None of this was ever proven. It remained and remains an internet theory, with no evidence beyond pattern matching and superstition. But the theory took on a life of its own. The theory spread across the Chinese internet. On Baidu, users analyzed every detail. On Qihoo, China's equivalent of Quora, heated debates took place. One side believed in the supernatural explanation. The other dismissed it as superstition. Some parents in certain areas reportedly forbade their children from wearing red. Forum users posted prayers asking to be protected from the curse of the boy in red case. The story became a modern Chinese urban legend, discussed alongside other infamous unsolved cases. In an online poll, this case ranked third in China's list of top 10 unsolved mysteries. The case may have also inspired copycats. In 2010, a 5-year-old girl surnamed Kai in Zhejiang was found hanging from a telegraph pole. She was rumored to be the 8th child in that county surnamed Kai, whose bizarre and otherwise inexplicable death had also been ruled accidental. On April 17, 2013, a graduate student surnamed Peng was found dead in his dormitory at Nanchang Aviation University. His body was decomposed, his roommates had been away for months, and he was wearing women's clothing, black stockings, and white high heels. The death was ruled sexual asphyxiation. Many online commenters drew immediate comparisons to The Boy in Red. In 2015, the case was adapted into a low-budget web horror film titled Yin Yang Records' The Boy in Red, released on IQY in early 2016. The film took creative liberties, but introduced the case to a new generation. But while the internet debated and filmmakers exploited the story, Zhijun's family never received the answers they sought. The old house in Shuangxing village sits abandoned now. Locals say Zhijun's father refuses to go back, that he's too afraid. And some say that on the wooden door, if you look closely, you can see the character for fate. The family still doesn't know what happened to their son. They still don't know why. They still have no justice. No answers, no explanation, no peace. The Boy in Red case isn't just a tragedy. It's a mirror reflecting China's anxieties about left-behind children, about rural isolation, about police accountability, and the collision between modern skepticism and ancient beliefs. So what really happened to Kuang Zhijun? The honest answer is, we don't know. The sexual asphyxiation theory, while uncomfortable, isn't impossible. Cases of adolescents dying from autoerotic accidents do occur, and they often involve elaborate setups that seem inexplicable to outsiders. The Maoshan theory, on the other hand, requires a belief in supernatural forces and ritual magic. For skeptics, it's an example of pattern-seeking run amok. But for believers, the details align too perfectly. The timing, the clothing, the elements, the positioning, all of it suggests intention. Kuang Zhijun's case has never been reopened. His family never received the truth. Perhaps the most important lesson is not in debating how he fell, but in facing what his story reveals. That left-behind children can disappear without anyone noticing. That cases can be closed too quickly. That families may never find peace. If we take that seriously, then his voice, even in death, may finally help protect those who are still alive today. So what do you think about this case? Accident, murder, or something else entirely? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.